Well, hey neighbor, thanks for joining us. We're talking about, or I'm talking about, what do you need to be doing in December? What are those garden chores that need to be knocked out in the slow months when we got time to do them? Welcome to the Row by Row Gardening Show, the best dadgum gardening show on the internet, where we talk about gardening, a little bit of cooking, and growing your own food. Now sit back and enjoy. Well, as you can see, my cohort is missing today. She had some family issues with her stepfather that's having some issues, and they had to take off and be transferred to another hospital, and he's looking at having some heart procedures done, so she had to take off and look after her mother while they went to do that. You know, so many times we get at Christmas time, we start thinking about our loved ones that's passed on and the seasons of life that we're in. We're in our late 50s, and we're in that stage of life where we have parents we have to kind of help out and tend to. I've lost my parents in the last 2 years, my mother and my father, so I have already been through this, what we call seasons of life, where you have to become the caretaker again. She's in that stage right now where her mother's not really doing well, and her stepfather that came into our life about 20 years ago is having some heart issues. We call him Gene Pa, and he had to be transferred, looking at maybe open heart surgery. They don't know yet. They're going to try to do a procedure, but he's having some issues there. So if you have a moment, say a little prayer for our Gene Pa. We just thank the Lord of him. We don't know what we would do without him. So many times when step parents come in later in life, I think they got married in their maybe early 50s, there's always some friction, or there's always some strife there, but we have never had that with Gene Pa. We have really been blessed that he came in our life, and he's been a complete blessing to everybody in the family. You just couldn't ask for a better person than what we have had. Her father died when in his late 40s of an accident. So we've had Gene Pa for the last 20-something years, and it's just been wonderful, and we're concerned about him. So if you have a moment, say a little prayer for Gene Pa so that he gets back normal, and we get back to business as usual. When we have to look after our parents at this season in life, like when you get into your late 50s or early 60s, or whenever that season of life comes for you, I'm reminded of what my neighbor shared with me about 10 years ago. My neighbor is 10 years older than I am. And about 10 years ago, he was having to deal with his mother. He was having to, look after her, cook her breakfast, cook her dinner, make sure she was all right, and took up a lot of his time. He couldn't do a whole lot, and this was for a prolonged period of time. And I was talking to him one day, and I was expressing my gratitude for what he did, and how troublesome or hard it could be. And he said something to me that's always resonated with me, and I'm going to share it with you today. He says, when your parents get into those situations, he said, what you want to do is what you need to do. And what we do is we take care of our parents. He said, that's what we do. And at the end of the day, when it's all over with, we don't want any regrets. And that really stuck with me. So when you look at these situations where we have to take off work to go tend to a parent, or it becomes an inconvenience, because it will, it's just naturally happens. And sometimes you get a little frustrated, things like that. You always want to remember that you won't, when it's over with, because they will become a over with time. It becomes a time when they pass on. You want to sit there and say, you know what? I had no regrets. And that's the way I faced it when I went through my parents. And that's the way I hope Mom Hoss is facing it with her parents that she's having to go through. At the end of the day, you want to do everything you can so that you won't have any regrets. And it makes life a lot easier when you go through those situations, when you lose a parent, when you go through them, and when they do leave, and you can say, you know what? I really don't have any regrets. We did everything the best we could. May not be perfect. We did the best we could. And yes, it was an inconvenience, and yes, it was tough sometimes, but I don't have any regrets. So anytime that you're faced with an issue where you get a little frustrated and everything, just think about that. At the end of the day, as my neighbor said, you don't want any regrets. All right, so moving on from that, it's my little preaching to you all today, okay? We're going to talk about gardening. And I'm doing it by myself today because Mama Hoss is gone. And Mama Hoss is the one that probably puts most of this together for me. So I'm going to probably struggle a little bit today. But we're going to move on. We're going to talk about a lot of things gardening. It's December. And in December, It's probably the slowest month of the year for gardening, but yet there's a lot still to be done. And when I think about December gardening to-dos, we think about some of those mundane tasks that I normally don't do in other times of the year. Excuse me. Now, one thing for December is, for me, especially on those cloudy days, it's kind of nasty, is I will get up there and kind of organize my garden shed. Well, I've already done one of my garden sheds and got it organized and got it cleaned up, and heaven knows it needed it because it can get strode out during the year. I've got one of mine done, but I got a bigger garden shed that I've got about halfway through cleaning out. But for me, I want to build me some racks in there, some really nice storage racks for my potatoes and my onions and my winter squash. So I'm kind of in the situation there where I'm trying to figure out exactly how I want to do this. I've looked online, looked at different rack systems. Preferably, I want something that's off the ground so I can utilize as much space as possible out of direct sunlight that still has airflow. Because I've struggled in the last few years having a good storage system, and I know if I store some of these vegetables correctly, I get a lot longer life out of them. And potatoes and onions and winter squash is one of those things, and even sweet potatoes, that we eat for a long period of time. Probably onions is the ones we use more than anything else, but we still got onions from last year. They were stored correctly. I didn't have a big area to store them like I wanted to. But I want to improve on that, and December's a wonderful time of the month to think about those simple little things like storage racks for some of your vegetables. Another thing is for our fruit trees and our berries, it's time to go out there and maybe do some pruning on some of those and get some of those more in line. If we got some branches that are maybe getting in the way when the lawnmower runs through there, December's a good time of the month to go out there and do some of those low hanging branches, prune them off. Our berries, maybe mine in particular, need a little help, so it's a good time to do that as well. And garden planting. Well, garden planting is a good one because, this time of year we're sitting inside, it's cold and rainy outside, and we start thinking about what do we want to plant come springtime. Well, between now and springtime, we've got a decent amount of time there that we can get some short-term crops in there to help with our succession planting. We still got time in December, January to plant some things like beets, radishes, lettuces, some greens, some brassicas, and all things like that that's going to be through by early spring. And then we can really focus, which what most people focus on is that spring garden flush. So as I think about what I'm going into, I'm going to still have some of the short-term crops going into that. I'm still going to use some cover crops to fill in some voids there. But my main focus as I sit in that recliner at night, I got my feet up under a blanket, I'm thinking about springtime. What am I going to plant springtime? Well, for us, springtime gardening always comes around with the staples that we've got to plant, and we plant these every year. Tomatoes is something we plant every year because we put up a lot of tomatoes. Mama Hoss likes to make a lot of salsa. She likes to make spaghetti sauce and even tomato juice and things like that to put up. So tomatoes are definitely a staple for us. And as I plan my spring gardening, I definitely want to draw up them out and make room for tomatoes. Now, some years I plant more tomatoes than I do others. It's according to how many preserving we did the year before. But I at least plant me about 20 feet, sometimes a good bit more than that. Then we move into other staples such as corn. We put up a lot of corn. We love corn, so we got to make sure that we got a room for a big plot of corn. We don't plant corn in raised beds. We plant it in a bigger plot, like a 20 by 30 or 30 by 40. Sometimes I plant field corn and sweet corn. So we got to make room for the corn because we preserve a lot of our sweet corn, and we like our field corns for making grits and cornbread and stuff like that, cornmeal. And then we move into other staples. Now, staples for us is green beans. We got to have green beans because we put up a lot of green beans, and we grow those in the spring of the year. Another one is cucumbers. The last few years, we have put up a lot of cucumbers, and Mama Hoss has got her recipe down on pickles, and we love her pickles, so we put up a lot of pickles. So those are some of the of the necessaries, we do onions and garlic, of course. We got to have those for the sauce and things like that. So we got our onions planted now and the garlic planted now. So as we move into that, we look at exactly what we've got to have, and I would encourage you to do the same thing too. Make you a short list of what you've got to have every year. Those take priority over everything else. For us, corn, tomatoes, pickles, cucumbers, those onions, we've got to have those. Now from there, we can kind of branch out and do some fun things. Squash is always something fun for us, but it's not necessarily a staple for us. We put up some squash, but we prefer eating our summer squash, and I'm talking about summer squash here, such as zucchinis and our yellow squash. Prefer eating those fresh, and those come off really quick. So I'll start planting those about the 1st of March, and I'll plant 2 or 3 plants of them until we get tired of them, and then we'll move on. So squash probably fits in next, but it's not one of our considered our staples. And then we move into other things that are just fun to plant. Okay, watermelons that I plant every year. Now, if you're gonna plant watermelons, cantaloupes, or muskmelons, or anything like that, you gotta make sure that you got a decent area set aside, and you need to start planting now for those crops, whether it be a cover crop in their area or whatever, because these vining crops take a lot of room. And if you're limited on garden space, you definitely need to plan ahead where you're gonna put those vining crops at. For me, I love planting watermelons. I love planting cantaloupes, as I grew this last year. I love planting winter squash. I love planting anything that's vining. Well, I said watermelon, cantaloupe, winter squash, any of those things that take a lot of room. I plant watermelons every year, but I don't plant some of the other stuff here, but I will pepper them in. I probably should be planting more of the winter squash in the springtime because I love those so much. And they store well for us too. So when you start planting out your garden, make sure that you have in your mind what you're going to plant this year. And Lord knows we want to plant everything, but we always don't have room for it. So plan ahead for that as well. As we're sitting there planning for our next year's crop, we also want to start looking at varieties. What is going to grow well for us in our area, and particular varieties that's going to suit our needs. Do we want a small watermelon? Do we want a big watermelon? Do we want a seedless watermelon? A seeded watermelon? All those things. We start talking about winter squash. Do we want a short storing variety such as a Peppo type, or a long storing variety such as the Maximus family, butternuts and things like that? So we can plan all that now as we're sitting with our feet underneath the blanket in December, staying warm. All right, and then we got cover crops. We can still use some of these short season winter cover crops going into the spring from here on. I don't know that I would recommend clover at this point. Australian winter peas and some other things that are easy to get rid of. Daikon radish, we can use those as a short cover crop to fill in that void going into the spring. Now, if you did plant clovers back during October and you got that and you're running into springtime, green beans is a wonderful crop to follow up with clover. So that would make a good rotation there. We want to make sure that when we plant out a garden, we are taking rotations into considerations. We don't want to plant any of the nightshades, which is tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, back in the same place again. Another thing such as okra, which I view kind of as a luxury. It's not a staple crop for us. I normally plant it, but it's not one of our staples. You definitely want to do some good rotation on things like that because our okra have nematodes real bad. So as we sit around this time of year, let's plan out a garden, plan out exactly what we got to have, and then plan out how we're going to fill in the gaps. What are we going to plant new? What are we going to plant a little extra of? And then we got to think about flowers and herbs. Now these are the ones that really consider extra for me. These don't take priority. If I got an extra place laying around, this is where I fill in the gaps because I like to have to grow a few flowers for our pollinators and just for the pretty aspect of it. But if there's one thing that you're on the fence about planting next year, that maybe you want to plant something different, try some of these herbs. These herbs, to me, I became fascinated with them a few years ago, and there's so many of them out there that do so many different things. We have really enjoyed growing herbs in the garden. So if you got something extra, something new you want to try, which I would highly encourage you to do, try herbs for this coming year. All right, so that gives you an idea of what we can be doing for December for our garden coming up. All right, so let me catch you up to date on some things that we've got going on. We just put potatoes, iced potatoes, on for pre-sale. Believe it or not, folks, before you know it, it's time to plant iced potatoes. We're pre-selling the varieties this year, and I'm going to name them off here. And as I name each one of them, the varieties off, I'm going to talk about each one a little bit. Yukon, which is probably one of our best sellers. It's that nice yellow potato there that makes a good size one. Red Norland. Red Norland is the red potatoes that most people talk about as the new potatoes. I think Red Norland is a superior variety over Red Pontiac because I think it does a little bit better here in the deep south than Red Pontiac does. And then we have Kennebec, which is that white potato that we sell. It's a big white potato. And then we have what I call these novelty types, and I'm going to get into those. Irish cobbler, Australian potato, French fingerling, Purple Majesty, and Viking. Now Viking out of that bunch there still makes a decent sized potatoes, but the rest of those potatoes there are kind of the small potatoes. French fingerling, the Purple Majesty, you know what a fingerling potato are, and then Purple Majesty is that purple potato. But these are the varieties we got this year, and we got them on pre-sale right now, so you may want to go ahead and get your potatoes locked down. Now here's what's going to be a little bit different about us than everybody else that sells seed potatoes. We're getting ours in hopefully the first part of January, which is really hard to get seed potatoes because our seed potatoes come from way up north, Minnesota, Maine, those type areas. And it's hard to get a truck out there this time of the year or in January. So we've already talked to our supplier. We want our potatoes in the 1st of January so that we can get them out to our folks and friends down in the deep south that need to plant their potatoes at the end of January and the 1st of February. So if you live in the deep south and you've had trouble getting your potatoes before, I hope we can help you out on that. I talked to our supplier, and he sells a lot of seed potatoes, and he said our would be the first truck out coming to the south. So hopefully we'll have them before anybody else does. So if you do pre-sales now and you go you go ahead and lock down your potatoes, come January, we'll go ahead and ship them out to you. And then if you don't need to plant them, you can spread them out and you'll have them when you need to plant them. So we got that going on. So let's talk about Christmas for just a minute. All right, you still got time to order your Christmas gifts if you want to order them. If you didn't see our show last week, we did Christmas gifts. But here's a little bit of the problem, folks. USPS has had some issues with shipping times this year. Now, UPS has done pretty good. So you will probably see these advertisements and things that go along that says, order your gift by X date and you can have it by Christmas time. I'm not sure that's going to work out real good this year because we don't know exactly how long USPS is going to take because they have been really sporadic on their shipping times. We've seen that in the last month too. We've seen it in the last year, but it seems to be worse with the holidays. I don't know if they overloaded or what, but you really can't depend on USPS. So if you need to order a Christmas gift, you need to go ahead and do it ASAP. Make sure you have it in time. I think if you order by somewhere around the 18th, you should have it by Christmas. Anything after the 18th, I think you're probably going to be taking a chance here. Now, UPS seems to be staying on time pretty good, but our friends over at USPS have really dropped the ball. So be aware of that as you're ordering Christmas gifts. Christmas cards, gift cards, we have those, so that's always a good backup plan if you need to get somebody a present. What is a better present than giving somebody a gift card so they can order supplies and seeds so they can grow their own food? That'd be a perfect one there. And also, if you got somebody that's a gardener in your family, you may want to buy them our soil sample kit here so that they can take a soil sample going into springtime and have everything situated and have all the nutrients and know what their pH is going there. So the soil sample box would make a perfect gift also going out. And like I said, go back and check that show out last week. We give a lot of gift ideas on some of the things we sell and some of the things we don't sell. So we kind of gave you some ideas there of what you could buy that outside gardener person in your life. All right, so as we move into Garden Spotlight of the Week, I'm going to have to put my glasses on. Get my paperwork ready here. All right. So, garden spotlight of the week is Holly Moore. Holly planted some of our top pick pink eyes for the fall, which I highly recommend doing. Whoop. And her harvest looks amazing. Great job. Holly is located in 9A, Alabama. And here's what she had to say. Get dirty. Now look at those right there. There's her crop of the top pink eyes there. And she got a little garden marker there showing what it is. They're full of blooms. And if you've never grown these things in the fall of the year, you're missing out on them. Now, Holly did a wonderful time there timing her harvest. You see how these things kind of purple and straw color there? That's a good time to harvest them right there. She's got a good harvest there, and this is what it looks like after you shell them out. Gives you something to do with those cold long nights. You can sit there and shell out peas. Now the good thing about this one, if you've never grown it before, it is a pink eye, but when you cook it, it has a clear broth. So this is one of my favorite peas. I love zippers, but I think top pick pink eye is going to be at my very top list. I know it's the easiest one to grow, and it's easy to shell out, and they're absolutely delicious because they make this big old pink eye pea right there that has that clear broth. So I grew them this fall. Probably had one of the best crops we've ever had. I think I planted them things in, I need to go back and look. I think I planted them like in September. And it could not work out any better. Had a good harvest, very little pest pressure. And it worked out a good time of the year, so they matured off when it wasn't real hot. So we was able to get out there and harvest them, pick them when it wasn't terribly hot. Weather cooled off a little bit. And we must have picked them at least 6 or 7 times. All right, folks, on the set somewhere is the Grinch. The Grinch took the place of our old goat, and if you find the Grinch, put it in the comments below, and we'll do a draw next week for the winner. This week's winner is Cindy Easterling. There you go, Cindy. Cindy, send us your shipping information to support@growhouse.com, and we will get you a wonderful set of Get Dirty socks out. Look at there. Boy, wouldn't that make a good stocking stuffer right there? The only way you can get these Get Dirty socks if you're the winner of the location of the old goat or the Grinch. So there you have it right there. You're kind of special, Cindy. All right, let's see if we got anything else we need to cover. I think we've covered about everything. Planting time is December. Plan for the springtime. Go ahead and get some of those weird things done, such as soil sample. Make a list of what you want to plant. Kind of draw you off a map of how you want to lay out your garden this year. Keep rotation in mind. And go ahead and get those seeds ordered and get everything scheduled out, get our mind right of how we want to do everything so we can be successful growing that wonderful spring garden. And don't forget, we got opportunities to grow things between now and then. So, and next week, Mama Hoss will be back with us, and maybe everybody will be doing better at that point. All right, folks, thank you for joining us. Now, get outside and get those hands dirty.